all. Today, we're going to continue our conversation on sustainable communities and exactly what they are. And especially today, we're going to talk about the values behind the idea of sustainability.
And with that being said, we would now like to really drive forward here and think to what are the steps that could be taken to achieve a sustainable community? Because we're once again revolving around that guiding question of what does a sustainable community look like? And I will have Hannah tell us a little bit about the three pillars and we'll dive into them specifically.
The three pillars of sustainability are these three, all encompassing pieces of sustainability and honestly pieces of our lives as people, our culture, our beings as humans. And so they are economics, environment, and society. And these basically cover everything. They cover our businesses, our need for money. The huge part of what impacts the environment is the use of materials. I think humans for too long have seen ourselves as all there is. The environment is something we use, but it's something we live among, just as living and breathing as we are. But it's important that when we are living, that's something we consider, the same way we consider our economic decisions and things like that. And then, of course, the last part is society, which is something we all live in, something we can't escape, and is just as important as everything else. When we make decisions, they have societal implications as well as economic and environmental ones. So it's just as big of a part to think about the social aspects of our community and if our communities are socially healthy as well as environmentally and economically healthy. So those are the three big key things. And I think Colby is going to dive into the economics pillar first and how sustainability functions within that pillar.
These three pillars are a good place to start. Diving into the economic, you want to look at this in terms of optimizing your budget by adopting a responsible approach to production, encouraging things like recycling, upcycling, creative reuse of products. For example, if you have an old bucket that you haven't been using in a while, you can turn it into a pot to plant your plants. Also, from an economic standpoint, using renewable raw materials and waste management. There are good points that are trying to encapsulate this idea of creating more of a circular economy to live in. And as by definition of the EPA, a circular economy is a change to the model in which resources are mined, made into products, and then become waste. A circular economy reduces material use, redesigns materials and products to be less resource intensive, and recaptures waste as a resource to manufacture new materials and products. What is it that we do at the end cycle of a product or something like that? And a lot of times in our economy, we think it just becomes waste. In a more circular economy, we think about what kind of byproducts can be generated off of this, what would be termed waste. Because when I studied abroad in Greece, I was actually blessed to spend some time with a really great professor there who was the professor I did research for, and we went on a hike to Mount Olympus, which was a mind-boggling experience to begin with. But on the way down, me and the professor that I worked for separated ourselves from the rest of the pack and had a really good conversation about life and environmentalism and things like that. And he said this quote to me, and I still remember to this day. He said, "You got to remember, Colby is not a product of nature. Waste is a human problem. There is no such thing as waste in nature. But as humans, we consider waste as a thing." Mm-hmm. He was driving that into me. If we do things the right way, there doesn't have to be waste. That stuck with me even today. That was over a year ago, and I still remember him telling me that. And I was like, man, what a great point. Because as humans, we really do think about products as use for us, and then it becomes waste. There's so many ways that we can contribute to our society and use waste products in a much more resourceful way. And all this really continues to promote this idea of sustainable consumption and better resource management, integration of waste into a second line of production or sales like byproducts, opens doors to success and sustainable development. Hannah mentioned profitability, money is a huge part of the world. If we get that thinking in a more sustainable manner, it can really breathe life into these other spaces like the environmental pillar and the social pillar. And then to even dive a little bit deeper into this, I really want to hit home on this idea, the importance of recycling products and the importance of trying to use renewable energy where you can, or resourcing your materials in a way that is much healthier, thinking about where you get your materials and what that company stands for. Another big thing that's going to be popping up from an economic side of the pillar is this idea of offsetting your carbon credits. The carbon market is still a very new thing that's starting to develop, and we're seeing more and more by the day. And in case you don't know how that works all too well, basically, let's say big company A, giant corporation, we'll just call it A, emits 5 tons of carbon into the atmosphere a year. They can start to do things like encourage farmers to and help them out in planting cover crops that takes out maybe 1 carbon credit, or they themselves can start to improve and things like that. And really what that does is you're trading carbon to offset emissions. And that can be a really great way for things to become carbon neutral, because they're polluting, but they're also supporting by planting trees where they can, restoring land where they can, and taking carbon out of the atmosphere that they're also putting in from a production standpoint. And these are what we're going to start to see more and more of. And it really, too, goes to show you that from an economic perspective, that businesses need to focus on efficient energy use. And that is a big way to save on their greenhouse gas emissions and just their efficiency as a business overall. And once again, big picture, all this really points to this idea of jobs have to exist. Profitability is important, and income for the community is so important, because these all contribute to happiness of people and ability for society to function. But we really need to think about how can we do these economic functions that are necessary for our life. How can we do them in a more circular way? How can we do them in a way that focuses on recycling, that focuses on not generating as much waste, creating byproducts? When businesses make decisions, they do this thing called a cost-benefit analysis, which is where they determine how much cost is this going to have to us in society and how much benefit can we bring to this. Businesses need to be honest about the ecosystem services they're altering. They need to value those correctly and really understand what it is they're doing at a broader scope other than just expansion. That's the gist of what this economic pillar could entail. I'm going to let Hannah go ahead and explain a little bit more of the environmental pillar.
I think that was a great way to talk about the economic pillar. And like he was talking about with profitability and things like that, I think the economic and the environmental pillar are the ones, or even just economics and environment in life, are the ones that butt heads, because the reason for not doing something sustainable is, oh, I hate the turtles. Like, it's like that is, I have to go out of my way to do that, or it's expensive. Like, it's not realistic for all business models. Like you said, the cost benefit analysis. If it's not beneficial to change their model or resources to be more sustainable, they're probably not going to do it. And that's where we see such a clash between these two. Once we see that environmental benefits have economic benefits, then these two will cohesively work, and I think we'll start to see action so much more, because we're definitely starting to see reduction in the prices of solar. And so if it's cheaper to buy solar than it is gas, companies will want to do that. That's where we see these two things have a difficulty and we see a struggle. The environmental pillar is obviously just as important to the pillars of sustainability, because its goal is to preserve and protect our natural environment for generations to meet the needs of the population now and in the future. The environmental factors of a decision can be in every decision, whether it's what you have for dinner, what color to paint your walls, what to wear, where to go on vacation. It connects to everything. Key parts of this pillar that we see in our lives that are like affecting this are resource use. So the key things that are really burdening our environment are the overconsumption and the overforesting of rainforests and forests worldwide that are decreasing biodiversity and impacting the health of forests so they aren't regrowing the same. And if we can't regrow the same amount and we can't have the same yield on our land, we're just going to have to keep taking more and more. And so it's this really terrible cycle that we see with resource use, but it also bleeds into pollution. And so if our environment isn't healthy, pollutants run rampant. Pollutants like trash, debris, waste floating around in our environment. And if we don't dispose of them properly, they come right back to us. Chemical pollutants, insecticides in farming, things like that. When you wear sunscreen and you get into the ocean, if we're all wearing sunscreen and getting into the ocean, eventually the sunscreen is going to start like being in the fishes. It's going to be in the ocean. And that's what the environmental pillar is all about, is it's considering, okay, when I wear sunscreen and it washes off my body, where is it going? And you can do that with everything. So that's really the key goal of the environmental pillar. It's pretty simple. There are a lot of ways we can fight this seemingly unending battle. We can fix our expectations and practices through education and awareness, classes to help the next generation be prepared, but also educating farmers. Colby, do you know about that? Isn't that something that Grace did? Somebody went and they talked to farmers about better practices so that way they could incorporate them.
Yeah,
I've seen that.
absolutely. I know Shavika has been doing work on that. She's creating a game to get farmers thinking about sustainability.
If you play this game, you're thinking about how to more sustainably farm your crops. So it's education through different methods. One way to achieve environmental protection is through policy making. It's a really slow method, but it is the most surefire way to actually protect the environment. There are lots of organizations like the EPA, Department of Energy, U.S. Fish and Wildlife protect the environment, make laws and regulations, especially the EPA. One really famous piece of legislature and policy is the NEPA or the NEPA. It's like a huge environmental act, and a lot of companies use it when building infrastructure or doing whatever it is that companies do to make sure they're following the correct environmental guidelines and they're not encroaching on special habitats. Bat migratory and mating patterns are something that people have to pay attention to a lot in construction. So I think those are really important pieces of legislature that help protect our environment and also reinforce this idea of sustainability within our communities, our government, and things like that. And then one more also really cool piece of legislature that was recently incorporated and might not see too much daylight is the Inflation Reduction Act, which was written and passed by Joe Biden, and it promises $7 billion in funding for renewable energies in America, which is a pretty cool and pretty big deal. Some of that is starting to roll out, and it's helping build solar farms, it's helping build wind energy. It's important to supporting the environmental pillar. We're starting to see technologies transition to renewable tech, efficient tech. More efficient technology reduces the need for resources, and a lot of things like that are really helping to hold up our environmental pillar. But there's one more pillar, the society pillar, that's equally important.
Yes. We've talked about the pillars through the lens of business and economics and the way resources move throughout society, to use the word again. We've also looked at the environmental aspect, the natural environment we have around us, the way we function within that, the way our decisions that we make as human beings impact that. Now we're looking at it from the aspect of us as people, as a functioning society. What does sustainability look like within our pillar? And I'm really going to work through here a wonderful piece that I found from Enel, which is an article that I found to support and do some background research on these topics. And like I said earlier, we'll be sure to have all the links that we use to gather this information at the bottom in the description. So if you want to dig deeper into any one of these areas, feel free. Looking at it from a society aspect, social sustainability involves a focus on the well-being of people and communities. It's about promoting equity, human rights, access to education and healthcare, and providing work for people, which once again brings to light that importance of the economic factor of sustainability. To achieve this, it is necessary to overcome poverty, social economic inequality, discrimination, prejudice, social exclusion, lack of access to resources, insecurity, conflict, locally, regionally, and globally, and poor governance, which includes phenomena such as corruption and institutional inefficiency. These are all important to keep an eye on, and the path to social sustainability includes the promotion of systems and policies that can reduce social and economic inequalities, ensuring equitable access to opportunities and resources for all members of society, making sure everybody gets their slice of the pie in a way that can hopefully be productive to all our lives as a functioning society. And really some points that really come up are this idea of environmental justice. I found a good definition in this tree hugger blog that I was checking out, and it really defines environmental justice as the standard of being fair, impartial, and objectively morally good. In an environmental context, this is the belief that every human being should have impartial protection and equal enforcement of environmental laws, policies, and regulations. Environmental justice is the movement that hopes to secure these rights for communities around the world, which once again brings to light the importance of making sure we're actually seeing each other as human beings. Common issues For example, where energy is produced, like treatment plants or coal burning plants, production plants, a lot of that is put in lower income neighborhoods. And those people are subject to those chemicals that are being put into the environment. All this is just pointing to that idea of how can we make everybody as best off as they can be, and how can we support one another as opposed to exploit people. That's a key point of the social aspect of getting people to work together and for each other. And this includes ideas like education, which you brought up in your environmental pillar, which is vitally important because having an educated society is tremendous in terms of pushing forward ideas like sustainability that are nuanced. We got to get people critically thinking about this. And the best way to do that is educate them, and then also training them to be able to think for themselves, be able to make opinions for themselves, and to really be able to hopefully make change. A huge part of the social pillar is human health. And in our communities, do we have access to recreation? Do we have places where people can go to have good diet choices? Do they have places they can go get fresh organic food or get greens? Do we have vegetarian options for people within our community? And just making sure people have healthy options. Is there a gym accessible where they can get fit and things like that? Those seem like they wouldn't be at all related to sustainability, but they are, because the whole idea of sustainability is how do we make everything function better within itself? And part of that is also us as human beings. How can we better adapt and work with our natural world that we find ourselves in? Now, this even goes to the point of, once again, connecting this to the economic pillar, is employee retention and well-being. How could businesses in our community make people happy, make people want to stay, and empower them and say, hey, I know you're doing hard work. We're not just using you to do this work and giving you your paycheck and forgetting about you. So we really care about you and what you do, and we appreciate the impact that has not only on our business, but on society as a whole. And so that really closes up the social pillar aspect. There's so much to cover. I know we've probably been talking a lot and throwing a lot of information at you, but there's just so much to cover because, as Hannah and I talked about a little bit earlier, sustainability is a very hard thing to define. There's so many different routes that people try to throw it at you from. And what we really are trying to do with this podcast is just get you thinking about it. What does it look like in your local community? What does a sustainable community look like? Because I bet if you asked, Hannah probably has a different definition than I do. That's the beauty and pain of this area of thought. So now we're going to dive into some case studies following this guiding question of what does a sustainable community look like. I'm going to start with Eco Village Ithaca, which is a really interesting thing that honestly I didn't know about until a few days ago when we were looking in and getting prepared for this podcast. But this Eco Village actually started in 1991. And it is an award-winning sustainable community, and it's all about experiential learning when it comes to meeting needs for food, energy, shelter, livelihood, and social connection. And this is actually the largest co-housing community on the planet, of 175 acres, 100 homes, and around 220 residents, which is amazing because within it itself, it also has roads and paths for people to interact with the area. It has a vegetable organic berry farm, gardens, and other places growing food for the community. And they have shared buildings, land, and conservation easements. The community's whole mission is to promote experiential learning about ways of meeting human needs for shelter, food, energy, livelihood, and social connectedness that are aligned with the long-term health and viability of Earth. They have a really big mission out there. And it's interesting to think that this community itself is even thinking about sustainability in a way that it's creating a mission statement, which is usually something you do in a business, is creating a mission statement for its community. They're really driven in terms of what they're looking for and achieving their goal of building a replicable model of a cooperative, environmentally sensitive village as a demonstration site for teaching principles of sustainability and permaculture. They work with Thrive, a nonprofit educational organization that is affiliated with the Center for Transformation Action at Cornell University. They do things like give tours at this property and educational programs that have hands-on training in things like community life, building sustainable communities, green building techniques, and so much more. And some really big points and takeaways for me when thinking about what does a sustainable community look like. This is a great example. This is a pretty extreme example. As Hannah pointed out, people decided we're going to do this on 175
They're all
acres.
in.
They're all in. And in case you want to find out more, look up Eco Village at Ithaca. There's an hour and 15-minute YouTube video all about this community. So they're definitely all in, and there's a lot to learn. If you want to explore what sustainability could look like to an extreme, I would definitely recommend checking out this. Research more to find out. Some really big points that this Eco Village at Ithaca brings to the table is the importance of education via experiential learning. Educating people on these topics is so vitally important. What better way than by putting them into hands-on situations where they can interact with gardening, they can interact with putting in LED bulbs into buildings, they can interact with solar energy and what that construction looks like, or just even the thought from a landscape architecture standpoint of designing a village in a way, or designing an area in a way that the stormwater runoff makes sense and goes into a way that is productive for the community. Or there's constructed wetlands that are supporting other aspects of the community. And another key point is recreation for people. Thinking about the social pillar, how do we keep people healthy? How do we keep people sane? From a place to get some alone time, a place to experience nature, and a place to just get out of the chaos that life can be sometimes. And these are all wonderful things that we can educate people about the importance of, and also how to pull that off within their own community and start to create that change so that communities, even the one that they live in, start to look, feel, and become more sustainable. But it starts with those people pushing the agenda and really being able to say, hey, no, we should do things different. The Eco Village at Ithaca is a pretty good example. There's 220 people all committed to living this way and supporting sustainability, living within their means. It really goes to show you that what can happen when you get people working together for a common goal is I think a lot of amazing things can happen. Change can be made and good can be brought to the world if we do things the right way for the right reasons. And so I think the Eco Village at Ithaca is a really interesting example of what does a sustainable community look like. Extreme, yes.
A little.
But I think just like anything, there's important things to take away.
We're going to end it here before we introduce our final episode on global sustainability communities and examples of what larger sustainable communities look like. Thank you guys for listening to this episode.